Welcome to Gemini season. If it has felt like the last basically half of this year has been a series of thwarted plans or revised manuscripts, conversations that felt like they had to be ran 3 or 4 times, that makes sense. There has been a lot going on with a lot of different things, astrologically, politically, personally, everything, right? So Gemini season, if I can be so bold to say, looks like the turning point where we get a reprieve. We acknowledge that there's been a lot of pain, a lot of strife, but now there is a turning of the tides in many different ways. And it may be best to speak about these transits coming up in a neutral way because it's a mixed bag. A mixed bag of lots of extremes that could show up in our lives, our personal lives, in a neutral or balanced way. So I want to be careful with that when I give my interpretations. When I think of Gemini season, I think about the saying, "It is not flaky to change your mind," which is a saying lots of people have said, but I've heard it from Michelle Pelzon Lipsitz, an incredible wise teacher in our times, talking about how, or she often talks about how changing your mind is responding to new information. And I think that is one of the things in our culture that we fear so much. And possibly the reason we talk about the zodiac sign of Gemini as two-faced, or they shift moods really quickly. I think that's a response to our cultural fear of mental change. So in this season, this month-long moment that the sun is in the zodiac sign of Gemini, I feel like we're called to examine why there is such a great fear of mental shifting. And then, if we want to go further, allow ourselves to change and shift with new information. Allow ourselves to receive new information. Allow ourselves to maybe approach a friend or a colleague that is going to give you something that may change your mind, and be open to that. So that's what's on my mind, is who can I talk with this month to help me lean more into my flow and what will allow me to grow, what will allow me to change, shift, and grow if I did not talk to that person, as if I didn't talk to that person. Another thing I think about with Gemini season is using our hands. I wonder if Jupiter's presence in the sign of Gemini for basically a whole year. I'm gonna go back a little bit. So what I've noticed amongst friends and culturally is in our discourse, we're talking about crafting, gardening, sewing, knitting, things that use our hands that we can't speed up, and we don't want to speed up because the process, Gemini words of process, practice, movement, using our hands is the magic of it, is the magic of these crafts, these creations. So I'm wondering if Jupiter's presence in Gemini has a lot to do with that, the expansion of this presence of hand making by hand, cooking, baking, that kind of thing in our culture. I would love to hear in the comments if you've noticed that as well, or if that's just my age bracket, mid-30s is when we begin, everyone's knitting, everyone is hand sewing garments, stuff like that. Let me know, because I can only notice what I notice, right? Here's my noticing. So thinking about Gemini season when the sun is in Gemini, maybe this is a period, a 30-day period where we use our hands. That Gemini rules the hands. All of those double-bodied signs, Gemini, Virgo, Pisces, Sagittarius, has a lot to do with the parts of our body where there's two of them. And specifically Gemini is for hands. So thinking about how we use our hands, how our hands gather things, gather information, how we tend to things with our hands. That's something to incorporate into the Gemini season for yourself. And then lastly, I was thinking about how Gemini, all of the double-bodied signs also have a lot to do with digestion. I'm not going to go into the deep dive on that, but I was thinking about mental digestion, the air sign, mutable sign, Gemini, confusion, mental exhaustion, brain fog, tripping up on words. That is usually a sign of there's too much in there, in the mind, and it has not been fully digested or integrated yet. So in this season, if you're sensing like, oh, there's just like too much going on, there's too much brain fog, you can't quite get ahead of your mind, this may be a really, really good season to focus on integration. And that could look like a million things, which is something I say all the time. It's a very personal practice to decide how you want to digest your mental information. That personally looks like journaling for me. Actively digesting, actively working through the thoughts that are like running around in my head with my hand, actually, is like one of the most fruitful ways for me to feel like I have my center again. It could look like knitting. It really could look like knitting is how you mentally digest. It could be conversing with someone else and like figuring stuff out live with another person. Dialogue is one amazing way to integrate mental information. It could be making boundaries around what you digest or what you ingest, I guess, consume mentally. So maybe it's you take after 5 p.m. every day, you don't look at the internet or your phone, or you don't even watch TV, like something like that, to help you digest. This is the season where mental overwhelm or brain fog would be more present than other seasons as well, because the sun is there. And what the sun does is the sun lends light or consciousness or attention to a part of our charts or a part of the sky. And collectively, that energy is Gemini, basically everything I've been saying. And then in your chart, which I'll get into for every rising sign, in your chart, that sun, our sun, is shining their light on like one area of our life. And it's pretty typical that all areas of the life, I'm going to back up. Wherever the sun is shining, no matter whose chart it is, the Gemini energy will be increasing mental energy as well. And that can be like, if we're thinking about the first house is about the self, the life, the desire, the impetus. So that energy would be more mental in your whole life, but more particularly in Gemini season, there's a more mental emphasis on your personhood. Okay, so that's my intro to Gemini season. I will be going through every single rising sign. For this video, it'll just be one element's rising sign. And yeah, let's jump in. Okay, before we jump in though, I forgot about this. There's like a bajillion things that are happening in this Gemini season, but there are 3 like major things, transits. The first is basically right when Gemini season begins, Saturn moves into Aries. Saturn hasn't been in Aries since the 1990s. So it's been a while since we've felt that energy. And some of us haven't even felt that energy in our lifetime yet. So I'll talk about this specifically for everyone's rising sign chart. But in general, Saturn in Aries we're shifting from Saturn and Pisces. We're past 2.5 years. Saturn, the planet of karma, limitations, lessons, boundaries, discipline, has been in the sign of like Pisces boundarylessness, compassion, fluidness. And there's so much to say about this. And I'm not doing like a whole video just on Saturn, Pisces, and Saturn, and Aries, and maybe I will. Well, what I'm seeing or what I'm sensing is that the past 2.5 years, there's been a lot of energy toward leaning into like wisdom teachers or developing one's own intuitive skills. And this has been pretty widely experienced compared to other generations. I think also because Neptune has been in Pisces, the sign of Pisces, for a while. I think like 12 years. So I think Saturn is asking us, or has been asking us, to lean into the lessons of developing our own psychic abilities, our own intuitive abilities, listening to the collective more closely, but also like dissolving boundaries between ourselves. This is like all very much vague language because I want to start talking about Saturn in Aries, where that the difference between Pisces and Aries is vast. I think between, speaking of any zodiac sign next to another, I think Pisces and Aries energy really is so differently experienced as humans compared to other signs possibly. I see Saturn and Aries asking us to develop our own selves. That's the Aries energy, like selfhood, initiative, leadership, our own agency, in not relying necessarily on the wisdom teachers or on listening to the collective. It's more about listening to our own chest, like speaking from the chest and learning those lessons of you are who you are, and your separateness, your individual separateness is like the most fruitful garden. And that's probably a really positive way to think about Saturn, a planet of limitations, in Aries, a really flagrant, fiery, loud, like zesty kind of energy. There are a lot of discussions on how Saturn in Aries has shown up on the global sphere in the past and how that looked like in conflicts. It often coincides with a great war or political strife. But thinking about this for our own personal energies, I think I see Saturn in Aries as the invitation to speak up, to be our own advocates, and not to rely on political parties possibly that won't be advocating for you, even if they say they will. That's a little bit of my own editorial there. So that's what I'm seeing for that. Then one of the other 3 transits for Gemini season that I'm seeing is significant is the Mercury Cazimi in Gemini on May 29th. So a Cazimi is when a planet joins the sun at the exact same degree, and Cazimi literally means, or translated means, in the heart of. So when Mercury is in the heart of the sun, it's this like day or two-ish long, like intense clarity. It could look like a beginning to a new season, especially when it comes to like your mental energy. I think because this is occurring in the sign of Gemini as well, there's a double emphasis on mental energy. So Mercury and Gemini. It could look like you get a really great idea that like is the beginning of a new chapter for you. So this Mercury Cazimi, it can show up in many different ways. It could look like a really important conversation happens that day. It looks positive in that it's inspiring, and possibly inspiring to change something. Doesn't have to change something, but that's the exciting thing of a Mercury Cazimi in this season. The 3rd transit is something that we've all been looking forward to for a while. This is Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter has been in Gemini for about a year at this point, and he's moving into Cancer June 8th, and he'll be there for about a year. Jupiter loves being in Cancer. Loves being in Cancer. Jupiter is at home in Pisces and Sagittarius, but Jupiter exalts in Cancer. And this can look like so many things. This can look like the collective is finally taking care of something, or everyone. Thinking about the Cancer energy of care and intentional support. Jupiter has not been that happy in Gemini. Gemini is technically a sign where Jupiter falls, doesn't feel as supported. So there'll be that great shift June 8th for a year from Jupiter not feeling great like in the sign to feeling the best Jupiter can feel in any sign. But there's a caution here, is that we put a lot of hope into this transit. We put so much energy, we're hoping that Jupiter in Cancer is a cure to all of ailments happening right now. And there has been so much violence and strife and loss and diminishment of care systems in our culture. So we need to be careful not to say, okay, well, Jupiter in Cancer is going to fix it. That may be true. There may be some really great developments where Jupiter is now in a place to make meaning-making systems amongst different people so that more people have support and feel nourished in this world. This may be true, but we also need to put our action behind that. We can't just wait for these like nebulous threads that Jupiter in Cancer promises to occur, right? So that's another thing is about Cancer energy, as well as Cancer is active love. Love is only powerful when it is acted upon. You can say day and night that you love something or someone or some place, but it's not until you put your action toward that the love is felt. So that's another thing I've been thinking about for Jupiter in Cancer. Okay, now we're ready to jump into the rising sign horoscopes for Gemini season. All right, we begin with our Gemini risings because this is your season. And if there's a question about should I be listening to my sun sign or my rising sign? It really is up to you, but my intention is to read for rising signs because in Hellenistic or ancient astrology, I can place where the planets are on the wheel of your birth chart by knowing your rising sign. So that's why I'm doing it that way. Okay, Gemini risings. Let's start with the Saturn and Aries and how that may feel or show up in your life. So your Aries house is the 11th house, which is your networks of care, your support systems, your friends, your social media presence. It's the house of fame. Basically, it's like who you go to for a wide network of support. Saturn will be here for a while. He does go back into Pisces for a bit this year, but for about 2.5 years, Saturn will be influencing this part of your life. What I see for you is Saturn is asking you to step up in your networks of care, your support systems. This could look like if we're being as literal as possible, this could look like being the leader in your spheres and helping people find their own way by showing up as yourself, someone who's like actively presenting how you're finding your own way. So you can be like the example in your spheres. If we are getting even more literal, this could be like showing up online and allowing yourself to not be perfect all the time, but be truly who you are in this world. So that may be something to think about for the next 2.5 years is how is the planet of discipline, Saturn, going to support you in being a leader in your sphere? And then we'll talk about the Mercury Cazimi in your first house. I expect this to look like a great clarity, a great idea when it comes to your health, well-being, your desires, what you want in this world. In the first house, a Cazimi is really like a great blessing in and understanding what your intentions are and getting really clear on them. So if you're thinking about a mantra to say to yourself every morning, this Mercury Cazimi on May 29th, maybe a really great day to like sit down with a notebook and write down that mantra or that affirmation that you can then say to yourself every morning for days, right? And then Cancer and Jupiter looks like a really great blessing in your security, your physical security, and what you surround yourself with that feels supportive of your gifts and talents. It can literally look like a greater source of income or flow of income in your life. It could look like just more physical support. And it really depends on the person, but this could look like a great year for developing your muscle tone or your muscle mass. It could look like learning a new set of skills that you feel like you're a beginner at, but this is the year where you become an intermediate or expert in. So think about that. You have a whole year with this transit, Jupiter in Cancer, where Jupiter loves to be. And I love to see Jupiter in the second house for you in Cancer, meaning that you are in general supported in this lifetime with your finances, your physical security because of that Cancer energy. And it's a place of nourishment. The more that you feel physically secure, the more you feel secure in this world, and really lean into that this year with Jupiter being there as a support person for that. Okay, so Libra rising. We'll start with Saturn in your 7th house in Aries. This looks like a 2.5-ish year transit where you're really separating who you are in your relationships in order to show up fully in them. So it's like the contradictory move of like setting boundaries around your personhood so that other people who are in bonded relationships with you or who rely on you in a bonded way can fully see you and witness your needs being met before they ask for anything else from you. And this may be a really difficult lesson to learn, but in the 2.5 years, by the end of the 2.5 years, you will have it down pat. Like you will completely understand what that dynamic might look like from now on, which is one of the blessings of when Saturn moves around your chart, is by the time he leaves that area of your chart, you are in many ways a master of that area of your life. And it may start with some small pops of lessons the first year or so, where it's like, well, that's not great. That's not comfortable. I didn't like how you did that. And there's this like negotiation energy. But if you accept this is a period of your life where you're getting really skilled at relational care and taking care of yourself before you take care of other people, this is going to be a really beautiful time of your life. So we'll move on to Mercury Cazimi in your 9th house. I see this as maybe a few days where you get a greater sense of what your place is in this world, which is kind of a vague thing to say, but it could look like this is the house of God. The 9th house is the house of God or meaning-making systems, spirituality, divination, travel, foreign affairs. It looks like getting a greater idea of how you want your life to make an impact philosophically or in the collective in a more mental way or a more spiritual way. And this will look very different for every person because it has to do with your belief systems. Like how do your beliefs support or aid in the way that you act in this world? This is a very social place of your birth chart as well. So I wonder if this day, May 29th, would also be a day where you're having a lot of conversations and you're seeing what other people think as well when it comes to spirituality or philosophy, so that you can like maybe adjust or check your own systems of belief. And then Jupiter in Cancer is moving into your 10th house. Oh, that sounds really great. It sounds like mm, the 10th house is the house of where we put our effort out into the world. So that's the house that we look to for career or your occupation or your most visible self. And when Jupiter is there in general, Jupiter expands how people can reach us and interact with us and witness our effort. So this looks like a really great year for maybe not adding any effort, but letting the effort you do put into the world be shown or be presented, and have people appreciate all of the work that you do and you have done in this lifetime so far. And practicing being visible. The more you practice being visible, the more people who can love you and appreciate you find you. So this is a year of I call it visibility practices, in how many ways can someone find you that you would consider kin or friend or support. That's something to think about in this year of Jupiter in Cancer. It's so lovely to have Jupiter in an angular house, the 10th house. And one thing about Jupiter is you don't have to lean into it. You don't have to make it count. You don't have to squeeze the marrow out of it. You can do that. But Jupiter doesn't necessarily want you to strive for his blessings. He's just in this part of your chart where he's helping you make sense of things, helping others make sense of you, because it's the 10th house. So don't feel pressured. Don't feel pressured to make it count. Accept the blessings, which is another visibility practice, is accepting that you will be supported, and practicing how to receive that with joy and ease. Okay, so Aquarius risings, we'll start with your Saturn and Aries in the 3rd house. So when Saturn's in your 3rd house, I think one of the better lessons to take, I'm saying lessons because Saturn is a planet of lessons. One of the better lessons to take for a 3rd house Saturn is to understand that your language, how you use your language alters reality. The 3rd house has a lot to do with like how we sense reality, though we may not fully understand all of the information that's coming in. Like how when you're on a walk, you don't notice that tree you see every day. You don't necessarily notice the car that's always parked out in front of your neighbor's house. So Saturn reminds us that our mind, our intellect, our language points our focus. Our language focuses our attention, and our attention is our reality. So for the next 2.5-ish years, you may be playing with or practicing or experiencing what that feels like to alter your own weekly or daily reality by being really thoughtful and careful with your language. And the lessons that may show up in this way is that you may be at one point imprecise with your language, and that may result in something that you feel that you didn't necessarily want to occur, or you didn't want that to be shaped in that certain way. So then the next time you speak about that event or thing or experience, you are more precise with your language. So then you experience more precisely what you desire. This may be like vague language, but I think that that's part of your 3rd house experience with Saturn. There is getting more specific when you want to be specific. Okay, so that was all the air sign risings for Gemini season 2025, and I hope you have a really beautiful time. And I really do hope that the second half of this year feels much different, right? Okay.